I'm Jordan Valdina. I'm a registered architect and a professional engineer. Designing spaces and connecting people to places they love is what I do. Using the material in this program, my hope is that I may inspire and provide value to you in your journey through our built environment. This is the Architecture Show.
This episode continued from part 1.
While it's the whole, of course, the structure needs to line up, right? Otherwise the whole doesn't stand up. Now, you can artfully do these amazing things like Calatrava or something where it's extending out into space and you go, how could it be standing up? But the truth is, he's a high artisan of understanding the basics of this needs to go on that. This needs to sit back here, otherwise it falls over, right? Stacking 2 blocks. So that basic understanding of all these pieces. Now, the existing conditions, what do you have? It's essential. You have to map it out. You have to take the time to do it. Let your architect draw up your house or get a survey or whatever it is that defines here's what we really have already. And then also give the process its just due for what you really want. Pictures speak 1,000 words, photographs, clippings from magazines, pictures from the internet, examples of what you want and why, and taking off the critic of oneself so that can flow. That's like the blue sky design phase, if you will. Really should be allowed to be fleshed out. A good architect's job is they will filter that. They will hone that, and that's sort of the first process. So, akin to a sculpture, you never want to take a deep cut too soon on the big rock. If anything, you want a bigger rock, right? You can always cut away more. You can't really add more back to it. And so the equivalent here is throw it all on the wall. Anything you want, for any reason. I don't know. I don't like angular form. Why? I don't know. I don't like sharp angles. Things that feel boxy. I don't like it. Why? I don't know. It feels, whatever it is. You don't need to have a right answer so much as do your best at fleshing it out. Okay, so that's programming. That leads into a couple ways of saying it. The concept design, which is the most broad stroke. You can think of somebody doing a quick sketch. Not that that's exactly what that is, but really if you look at it simply, overall, the process, the design process, once you have those basic raw materials of what do you have and what do you want, and done well, right? The process is really just one of translation, choice, simplicity in expression of overall and essential pattern, and then fine-tuning, iterating, honing, detailing, specifying. That's the process. So it's like, whatever metaphor you want to use, a hazy view to a sharp view, painting a canvas and just, getting the background and some of the shades and the sky, and then detailing in the little pieces. I mean, it's that simple in one way of looking at it. So the name of those phases of fleshing out and detailing, again, concept plan, can also be a relative of a master plan. There's great value in having a master plan even if you don't build it. That's the whole point of a master plan. It's to make sure that even if you build just step 1 of a master plan that has conceptually 8 steps, for example, you're doing so in a way that's congruent with a vision for what could be. It's very important. It's very easy to go a little too fast to build something that later you regret because it's in your way of what you want to do next. Even if you can't do it now because of time limitations, budget limitations, you want to leave the door open for, well, my long-term goal, if I really could, would be the following. A good architect's going to translate that well into developing a master plan to whatever level of detail. Concept plan is the least detailed, if you will. That develops a little more into a schematic design. These are just terms for things getting more detailed. Schematic design. A basic understanding of the arrangement of space, floor plan, dimensionality, yes, views of the building from all sides, the so-called elevation views, the elevation drawings, front, sides, rear. Then that goes further and starts to develop into what's called the design development drawings. Again, this is just terms for really describing that it's getting more and more detailed, finally into the construction drawings or construction plans, or more officially construction documents, the totality of things specifying what is to be built for a project. So existing conditions, feasibility, programming, hand in hand. Master planning, if you do it, yes, good, Okay, concept design, schematic design, design development, construction drawings. That's the basic sequence of the unfoldment and the detailing of a design in the world of architecture. So that's just a little bit about the basics of architecture. Now somebody could say, well, this whole thing has been sort of process focused and not design essence focused, and there's a reason for that, because there's just so much to design. I sort of want to put the context first, but I'm going to say just a little bit, just a little bit about design. Sort of hinted at some of this stuff earlier, and that the real thing is doing it, the practice, again and again and again, and getting good. Again, some people are talented, they have to do it less, and yet they do it really well, right? But the simple rule is one has to show up and engage in the practice again and again and again to hone those skills. So knowing the basics almost without that is not understanding how it all is. Otherwise, the value of somebody who's skilled in these things, in an architect, and it often is, by the way, belittled, really. It's like, oh, I knew that. Again, because these things sound like common sense. If you back up and look at what was said, start simple, say what you want, draw it up. The drawing's going to start simple, it's going to get more detailed. Yep, So, again, the key is understanding that that's actually a skill to navigate that well. And the way to test it would be to literally go, say, work in an architect's office, or say, let me work on this for free. See how you do. It's harder than it looks, a lot of this stuff. It takes practice, that's all. So, some basics of design that likewise are so simple, and yet take practice to get right, as a starting point, and it's only a starting point, right? It's like musical scales and certain harmonies. You start there, things are likely to sound pretty good. As one becomes a better musician, you realize, or artist or whatever, that you can throw in these off notes and these things in between, and it makes it like outstanding or beautiful, but it also runs the risk of really messing it up. Similarly in architecture, you can start with some basic concepts of symmetry, a balance. What's balanced? Does dark go on the top or the bottom? For a basic balance, and light, dark versus light. Dark on the bottom, light on the top. Why? It's sort of, maybe we could make a theory about that's the way it looks on the earth, but whatever the case, that's what feels naturally balanced. So you start from a place of natural balance. You start from a place of traditional reference of proportionality. You start from a place of, generically speaking, basic symmetry compared to asymmetry. These vectors of design, but they're not a cage at all. They're just the first steps of sort of starting to approach the feel of design. They're sort of like orienting and getting the ballast, if you will, right, upon which one may then start to extend, right? And so if you look at the basic essence of a building structure, it has to stand up, which, here on the ground means certain immutable laws must be respected about it grounding that kind of relate to the things I just said in terms of balance and symmetry and proportionality. Not exactly, but for something to stay upright and to be stable. But then, once those principles are understood, they can be creatively engaged with one another to start to, again, extend, do something asymmetrical, do something that is apparently off balance to create a dynamism and an excitement. Well placed, that's great. Not well placed, it's abrupt, it's disconnected, it's disconcerting, but done in the right way, the right placement, it's beautiful and exciting. For example, one of those pools, where you can't see the edge and it just like merges into the sky. That's balanced and grounded, and yet it sort of is taking away something that we would intuitively expect, which is like a horizon line or a break line, and doing it in a way that's potentially very inspiring. So that's just one little example. But those are the basics of architecture, basically. And again, somebody could say, no, those aren't the basics. There are other basics. Yes, there are. But the ones I want to highlight are what comes up given limitations of time and resources. And then with those limited time and resources, the art of choice, understanding all that's entailed in that action, the pitfalls, the likely feelings that come up when cutting away from one option and choosing another, which by definition generally is going to feel like an imperfect choice because you have limited time and limited resources, but to do so well, wisely, in the context of a well fleshed out program, the articulation of all that you really want, with a good architect helping to translate that back into a master plan, a concept plan, develop it into a schematic design that you're hopefully okay with, develop that further into design development drawings, and then finally into construction drawings, from which one may get their building permit, and from which contractors may provide bids, pricing, and finally from which the chosen contractor or contractors may build the project. So these are just a few of the basics of architecture.
Key life.